The Two Sons Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Really quickly, before we get started, if you guys are tuning in, we'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ahsoka's over, but there's lots of stuff to go into that we didn't really have a chance to get into last week.
Right.
First of all, how you doing, man? Are you doing? We had a couple beers and chilled by the fire with our wives last night. At our age, that can be a little rough. I woke up with a headache from 5 drinks last night.
I know. Having more than 2 beers apparently will put you out for an entire half day.
I literally woke up this morning and I'm like, oh my God, I'm washed.
Dude, I know. I woke up with just a splitting headache. It's like, of course.
You left us last week with a interesting kind of cliffhanger.
Yeah.
You said one of the things that you and I have had trouble with nonstop is the idea that the entire Skywalker storyline,
correct,
and everything that culminates in Anakin essentially fulfilling the prophecy and bringing balance to the Force by killing both himself and Vader essentially at the end of Return of the Jedi, in bringing that balance, that entire storyline is destroyed by the sequel trilogy. And you hinted at the idea that maybe Dave Filoni was planning on fixing that problem over the course of this next storyline. Can you expand on that a little bit?
For sure.
I'm really curious where you're coming at here.
Well, that was a perfect intro because, you know, all of Star Wars, like Star Wars legitimately was about the balance of the Force and Anakin Skywalker, like empowering that balance essentially. And then it was so frustrating for Star Wars fans because when episodes 7, 8, and 9 of the movies came out, that essentially was destroyed. Like Anakin, aka Darth Vader, essentially sacrificing himself to kill Palpatine was essentially just lost in the wind. It was just worthless. Which was super, super frustrating as like a true Star Wars fan. With that being said, though, Dave Filoni, clean up on aisle 7, is like doing his thing and continually. Like Dave has always tried to respect George Lucas's vision of Star Wars, whereas I think other content creators for Star Wars haven't really understood George Lucas's vision, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what he's done is he's almost created a larger story than what the Palpatine, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker saga was, and he still is using Anakin to bring balance to the Force. So and he's doing that now through the Mortis gods, and it was almost like, I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. I feel like it could have been intentional, where now Anakin still could be the balance between the light side and the dark side on even a greater level than what is Palpatine's story.
Are you hinting at the idea that this Force ghost of Anakin that makes an appearance on Peridea could essentially be replacing the father? Is that what you're saying?
Potentially. I mean, out of anybody, that's who it makes sense the most. I know some people are saying like Baylan, and I get that. Like Baylan did have some characteristics of the light side that you and I talked about during previous episodes, and he obviously had characteristics of the dark side that we talked about in previous episodes. I don't think Baylan's powerful enough to house that type of importance. Even though I love his character, right? With that being said, though, we know Anakin Skywalker is incredibly powerful. Like even starting as with young Anakin, like his midichlorian count, right? Like through the roof, never been seen before. And then he was able to bring down the daughter and the son when they were, on Mortis, and he was the only one that was able to do that because he truly is the chosen one, right? And not only that, but the father has already asked him to take his job, and Anakin already said no. So I think like this is Dave Filoni just cleaning up the mess of Kathleen Kennedy's modern Star Wars, and I think like somehow he did it again where he created like an overarching story that was like see, he's still the balance of the Force, he's still the chosen one.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I am curious to see the direction they go there because I still wonder if the reference is that the Night Mothers are the Great Mothers are basically running away from whatever this entity is. And like, I think one of the things that gets convoluted is it's really easy to point to goodness winning, or the good side or the light side winning as part of like the ultimate goal of a Star Wars story. But like, there's very much a a reality to like kind of like a gray area with Star Wars as it pertains to balance, because like that's the whole point is like it's not just the light side wins or the light needs to take control. It's like there's always going to be a dark side that rises that kind of confronts it. I mean,
and vice versa. Yeah,
exactly. And I think one of the things that I've appreciated about, you know, the Legends version of the story is like, and I remember this from back when I read the books about the Yuuzhan Vong in the past and stuff, but like the Sith are extinct officially when Vader and Palpatine die, right? We're going to cover Darth Bane. We're actually going to cover the first Darth Bane book in the second half of this episode today. And like the thing with Darth Bane is like it's a fake extinction. So like the balance still exists, even though the light side is in control of the galaxy. The balance still exists because the dark side is growing in power in the shadows, right?
Yep.
But like when Palpatine and Vader die, there's technically nothing there.
Good point.
And so there almost needs to be a growing dark side force.
Dude, that is some Star Wars theology. That is Star Wars theology 101. And I see exactly what you're saying.
Well, and for the record, I don't know how we reconcile that with Palpatine still existing, because he's off in the unknown regions doing his thing, right? So like, it is super tricky and convoluted, but like, at the end of the day, the idea of balance essentially is like no one side gets too much control over anything. And any time one side gets too much control over anything, the other side will come and effectively cause problems. Now, what's interesting about that is
the Force is undefeated with that, by the way.
And I think that's Balin's point. Balin's point is like I've seen this over and over again as one side unseats the other. And maybe that is what he's kind of like chasing after in this like, you know, wasteland of Peridia. He's basically looking for something that can actually bring true balance, and maybe that ends up being something like Anakin, but like it just doesn't. I just have a hard time with it from the standpoint of like the fear that Thrawn is feeling and the fear that the Great Mothers are feeling, and even Ezra's like, get me the hell out of here. So like, it's super convoluted. I will say though, in the big picture, I'm excited about the idea of Filoni tying off some of these storylines, because like that can go a long way towards at least making something palatable. Not something that we'd be thrilled about. I'm never going to be thrilled about 17,000 Star Destroyers with phallic planet-killing guns on the bottom. But like, I'm never going to be like, dude, I'm so down for that. Like, I think I tried to rewatch Rise of Skywalker like a few months ago one time, and I literally couldn't make it through 4 or 5 scenes before I was like, I can't watch this.
It's just so bad. It's so bad. It like literally the scale, and we won't get into it. It's just the scale makes no freaking sense.
It makes no sense.
It's just so stupid.
And that's the beauty of Ahsoka, is there's like Luke and I were actually talking about this last night. Like the Star Destroyer. This is just a regular standard Star Destroyer that's behind Luke here. And I actually think it's technically like, I remember this from the X-Wing Alliance video games, but there's actually 2 versions of the Star Destroyer. And this one is the newer one because it's got the cut-ins on the side. You see that? But like, anyway, the Star Destroyer is such an iconic ship.
Right.
Like Luke was telling a story to me last night about this documentary on Disney Plus, talking about basically like the model designers in the 70s.
Like the unsung heroes of Star Wars.
Yeah, who like conceptualize all these things.
Yeah.
You know? And like there's an iconic enough like presence in the initial material. You don't need to magnify it 1,000 times.
Exactly.
Like, and it almost cheapens it and makes it feel shitty.
You're totally right. And like to your point is the final episode of Ahsoka was incredible, right? And it literally had 1 Star Destroyer, 1 Jedi ship, like 2 TIE fighters, and some little egg people,
and 20 stormtroopers,
and stormtroopers, and that was dope. Like that's perfect for Star Wars world, instead of, you know, Kathleen Kennedy's vision, which is 17,000 Star Destroyers that all have planet crushing capabilities. It like none of it makes sense. It's so bad. It is so bad. And this isn't what this podcast is supposed to be about today. It's just so frustrating about how bad it was. Like, it makes no sense. Like, that's
the predicament that Filoni's in. Is
and
like,
he's doing a good job.
If he wants to try to fix it, he's got his work cut out for him.
Correct.
You had a hilarious thing in your notes. You said that the lack of dismemberment was a huge problem for fighting the stormtroopers that were becoming zombies.
Yes. Which is one of our comments. Like, so thanks for whoever commented that, you know, and like the whole entire time I was watching this, I was just like, just cut him in half.
Yeah.
Like there's a special term for the type of like material plastic that the stormtroopers are made out of. I forget what it's called. It's very Star Wars sounding. It's like, just cut those dudes in half. Like, let's just get it done. Like, yeah.
Dude, it was absolutely hilarious because like literally they were hacking and slashing. There was literally and you watch like Anakin and Obi-Wan hitting the same damn moves on droids and just cutting them to pieces, just bisecting. Heads are gone, arms are gone, waists are gone, like everything. And then like Ezra's hitting the exact same move on stormtroopers, except for like as he's going through the abdomen, he's like going shallow through the middle of the abdomen,
glancing off.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, you're
finish them.
I just imagine Ezra too, like standing there, like, how are these guys still able to walk? I just cut these dudes to pieces.
Like the one dismemberment was the Dark Trooper or Death Trooper head,
and they couldn't even
rolling
show
off.
And they
Well, they kind of did. Like, but like at the end of the day, like Star Wars just needs to lean into dismemberment. Like everyone who gets cleaved in half, like, will immediately stop bleeding because it was done by a lightsaber, and it's just, I don't know, like a topless body. Like, that's okay, right? It's not like bloody and gory and stuff, which is one of like the really cool things about Star Wars. You can have really cool shit and not have it be like overly gory.
Well, it's kind of like selective dismemberment already.
I know, dude.
Like literally, Darth Maul gets chopped in half at the waist, and we watch his body tumble.
That's
in
a really good
pieces
point.
Through a shaft. Like, we've seen Anakin literally get cut to pieces. We've seen him get burned alive.
Yeah.
We've seen like there is a healthy
That's
amount
also
of
very
darkness.
Good point. There is, man. There
and
is.
Now, okay,
which we'll get into.
Can we
in
acknowledge
greater...
the realities of how difficult it is to shoot dismemberment in film?
To like actually like the logistics of cutting the body in half.
Would you be okay with like CGI coming in and showing a CGI stormtrooper getting cut in half, or would that violate your Star Wars sensibilities?
No, I think CGI mixed with some good practical effects is always a plus. I think they could totally make it work. They already did make it work because we saw a rolling stormtrooper head in the last episode of Ahsoka.
All you have to do is have a statue just kind of slide in front of them as they're doing it, so it just kind of hides the...
Exactly. Yeah, they could figure it out. They could totally figure it out.
There was a hilarious part of that same scene where literally Sabine is like really struggling to deflect things with her lightsaber.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then Ahsoka is literally just like, "Hey, Sabine, blasters."
Get behind us and just start shooting.
You just got shot twice in the chest. Like, put your lightsaber away, Sabine, and get your blasters out. Do what you're good at. Come on, this is not training. We have zombie stormtroopers,
and for some reason their arms are not coming off when we chop at them. Well, the thing too that was funny about that is like you put this in your notes, and I think it's super interesting. This idea that like essentially Sabine was dangerous to train.
Yes.
So like Hu Yang says Ahsoka was afraid that Sabine was training to be a Jedi for the wrong reasons after what had happened on Mandalore. Yeah. Basically meaning like her family gets killed in the purging of Mandalore. Her entire race. And in that situation, she's fueled by what would be considered like dark side power, let's call it.
Correct.
Right.
And apparently Sabine's pretty healthy in the Force.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that's the interesting thing that I was looking at there was like I don't understand how you reconcile her being really not that powerful according to Hu Yang, but at the same time dangerous. Like that specifically, because Hu Yang actually uses that word. He says at the time Ahsoka felt like if Sabine unlocked her potential, she would become dangerous.
Yeah,
that either leads you to believe that she has like some sort of secret, super powerful connection to the Force that's like trapped behind a bunch of like mental walls.
Yeah,
or what the deal is.
I think all that is we just know how potent the dark side is if you're angry. Like, and I think honestly that's all it is. Like, I think,
for anybody,
it could be a huge problem.
Quick path to quick power. Kind
exactly.
Of thing.
Yeah. Which is just not sustainable. And there's a chance too. I mean, like, let's break this down, dude. Guess who's still on that planet with Sabine? I mean, with Ahsoka, it's Sabine.
Shin Hati
and
Sabine.
Yeah. Like, Sabine could be the embodiment of the dark side at some point. Like, I find that highly unlikely, but it's true. Like, could you imagine a world where Sabine starts to get really strong in the Force, and then she starts to draw upon power of the anguish that she felt when like her entire people were destroyed by the Empire? Like, that could be very potent. Like, again, highly unlikely, but there's always a possibility that the Sabine could be the embodiment of the sun someday.
There's so many different directions that this whole thing with the Mortis gods can go.
Yeah.
And there's basically, the way I look at it, there's like two directions they could go. It could be essentially like you're saying, we know that the father viewed himself as replaceable because he basically told Anakin, like, you should replace me.
Correct. And he was aging and dying.
Exactly. So there's a version of this where like existing characters kind of slot into roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the alternative is some sort of fourth entity that's a Mortis god, which is only in Legends, right?
Yeah.
But something like that is deep and dark and evil in its own way.
The mother, yeah.
The mother, yeah. Which, and that I think I find that which direction would you prefer to see it go? I find that to be the most interesting because like I would love because okay, I hate when they get away from the Force. Mm-hmm. Because like to me that's the core story of Star Wars in so many different ways. And like I think again like every Star Wars story kind of has to fundamentally, at least the important Star Wars stories have to fundamentally start from the standpoint of the battle of light and dark. And like I understand that they're like reticent to be like, let's go back to Jedi versus Sith again. I think they're deliberately taking a break from that because they probably want to bring that back in a big way when we go back. Like when they really go back, that's when they're going to dive into Jedi versus Sith again, I think. And I think
to like High Republic era
or older or even older.
Okay,
potentially. I mean, we know that they're coming out with a show that's from 25,000 years ago in the Dawn of the Jedi, which like apparently is going to be, you know, like that's going to be weird.
It's just cavemen.
It's like they literally just have clubs.
Just the entire episode is like one caveman like using a crappy version of the Force to like win a steak over his brother.
I am down for like an alternative interpretation of the dark side versus light. And like what is really cool to me is the idea of essentially like this different kind of dark force entity going against Ahsoka in a weird way, who represents the light side of the Force in a non-Jedi way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I'm down for that. And so that's what I'm rooting for. Would you rather have that, or do you hope that they kind of do something more along the lines of replacing the characters?
I think they're going to try and align existing characters into slots that already exist.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting
they're
theory.
just teeing it up to way too much for that. Like for it to not be that. Why is Baylan there? Like, why is Shin Hati there? Why is Sabine there? Why is Ahsoka there? Like, I feel like they're going to try and replace these characters. They leaned so heavily also into Anakin Skywalker still being present there. Like, I feel like if I had to put money down on anything, I feel like Anakin Skywalker is going to be the father figure and the true balance of the Force.
I think we're going to have a lot of Anakin moving forward, which I'm so down for.
I am too, dude. The other thing, too, is, like, Ahsoka has already essentially embodied the daughter's personality, like, to some degree, right? Like literally the daughter sacrificed herself to save Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. So, like, we've got two people right there that are already fitting spots, you know, beautifully.
And yeah, and Shin Hati kind of represents like there's all the pieces there to potentially make something like that work. And you can kind of imagine a situation too where like Anakin is making separate appearances to them through the Force, like kind of reining them in one way or another.
Do you think Baylan's character is divine enough to be able to embody the Son character? Probably
not.
Yeah.
But I could see. Here's the thing. What if Ahsoka, I mean, because we already are looking at the owl character, right?
Right. Morai,
which is an extension of the daughter.
Yeah.
What if Ahsoka essentially like comes full circle and becomes the daughter?
I think she is. I think that maybe has already happened essentially.
Oh, okay. So you think that's basically like where she is in her brain space? She's supposed to be here. She's supposed to be the daughter.
Yep. She's like, there's been crazy stuff that's happened with Ahsoka that like hasn't really happened to other people in Star Wars. Like she was saved in the world between worlds twice. Essentially a Mortis god, aka the daughter, gave up her life in order to save Ahsoka, and that was through like, I don't know what you want to call it, like an energy transfer that was done.
So she already has that energy.
Exactly.
In her. Yeah.
And then Morai, whom used to follow. And then Morai just follows her around as like the remnant of like, you know, the daughter that was. Like, so I think it's already happened.
So essentially the way you would put it together is like Shinhati is essentially just an ancillary character who's going to have some sort of nuisance role with her in these mercenaries. Balin essentially becomes the son. Ahsoka becomes the daughter. Balin probably gets a little out of control, and then Ahsoka essentially has to bring balance by checking
potentially, or maybe, and this would be really boring, is Ahsoka understands the light and dark power. Anakin understands it too, and then Balin kind of already understands it too. Like all of these people are already in this understanding of like this balance that's supposed to like exist. Now, how that would be interesting on screen, I don't know, because that seems pretty boring. Where they're all like, "Oh yeah, symbology. Like we're all gonna be great together and live on this planet, and we're all just gonna be super nice to each other. And I'll be kind of evil, and you'll be pretty good, and Anakin's gonna be Papa." Like,
well, so how does that work from the standpoint of tying to the big storyline? Though?
I don't know.
Like, because like that's the other thing is like
maybe Balin starts to get power hungry, like what you said. I don't know.
At some point, the powers that be in this universe, I think, have to make their way to the normal galaxy. I would think.
Well,
otherwise, you're ending the. Basically, what you're saying otherwise is, Ahsoka is going to essentially exist in this realm forever.
Which is super boring.
And it will tie off that storyline, and then that storyline will end.
Yeah, it would be like, hey, remember the last time we saw Ahsoka? And she's just on that planet?
Yeah, and so then then it's just THRAWN versus Ezra round 3 in the regular galaxy.
No,
like,
I know. There's something more to it, of course.
Yeah. I will be honest with you, like this was my one big beef with the season finale from Ahsoka. Like, I wish they would have just given us a little bit more. I think.
Yeah, there's always a cliffhanger, right?
You can do a cliffhanger is a normal, cinematic, strategy
tool,
tool, whatever you want to call it. But like, I feel like there's a fine line between leaving you too much in the dark to where it's hard to even get excited.
I hear you.
Whereas like for instance, let's say Ahsoka season 2 doesn't come out for a year and a half because of the writer's strike. Like,
and it just takes a long time to make good stuff, man.
Oh yeah. Like, guys, like it's already been like 18 months since Rings of Power and House of the Dragon came out, and literally House of the Dragon's like slated for late next year. Mm-hmm. Like it's gonna be forever until we see these things, and so at that point, like I feel like if you give just a little bit more of the lore, it helps you kind of understand things better. Then you could do things like write a book that kind of helps explain. So, like it'd be great if there was let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say that they like actually revealed who this entity was that's in this other galaxy. Yeah. What if they literally wrote a book then?
Dude, it'd be so incredible.
THRAWN, Ezra, and this entity
Timothy Zahn writing this book for us,
navigating Peridia in the time before. But now they literally can't do that because
Kathleen,
there's this huge
sign us up. We will write for you.
You see what
Dave,
I'm saying,
call us up to the big leagues, my guy.
It's like, but it's just a little bit of a missed opportunity to me because like that's the thing is
Agreed.
like they are able to, for instance, when they in the first, imagine if in the Force Awakens movie they like had a strong hint at an enemy but never actually revealed it. Then they couldn't release the 3 books of the Aftermath trilogy that help explain how the Empire got dissolved and kind of recreated. Like it's all, you open up possibilities there. Now it literally feels like, okay, now we're going to switch over to the Acolyte. And then after the Acolyte, we're going to get Andor. So we're literally going to go into two completely different eras. We're going to go back to the High Republic with the books too, starting in November. So it's almost like, here's this massive like cold ending before we take a huge break before we dip back into that source material. And it feels like we just got back into the source material.
Yeah, and this is mainstream source material, right? Like I would understand if they did a cliffhanger if this was like a book. It's like, no, like this is the main stage of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's funny because I didn't think of all that until you were talking about it, but that makes so much sense. Yeah, I totally agree. I wish we would have had a little bit more. A little bit more.
Just a little bit. And again, I'm being nitpicky, and we're going to what'll end up happening is they'll make some sort of review, because like that's the thing too, like imagine the trailer. Like the trailer for season 2 is also going to have to be unbelievably vague. Whereas like had they just hinted at who the entity was, they could actually get people excited through that. Like it just, again, I'm being nitpicky, but that's the thing that's confusing to me.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe in the trailers they aren't as vague, and maybe we do see like, some obvious indication of who it is. Like they kind of did that with THRAWN. Like, hey, Ahsoka's coming out, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, are we going to see THRAWN? Are we going to see THRAWN? And then you see Thrawn on a trailer. And it's just like the dopest
in the
thing.
Eye of Sion,
so they actually did do a big reveal, and maybe that's what they're doing now. Is they part of the story is told in the trailer almost, which is like a little bit disappointing, but maybe that's what they do.
And here's the thing, it's gonna be fine. We have things to occupy ourselves. We are gonna get super invested in the Acolyte. We're literally reading the Bane books right now. We're gonna get into the High Republic starting in November. Like all of this stuff is good. But at the end of the day, like it's really weird to like bring back this massive, like kind of resonant storyline,
deep Star Wars
lore, and then have this huge cold ending that just leaves so much resolved.
I will say though, like with all of this though, and again, like kudos to Dave Filoni. He's doing something that a lot of other people have shied away from, and it's this theme that we see in successful storylines, aka like Game of Thrones, which is like people can palate very deep lore when it comes to particular things, and there are people that I'm sure had no clue what was going on with like the father figure and like all this stuff, right? Like, but then I still feel like they could watch Star Wars and Ahsoka and still have a really good time watching it, even if they don't have an entire backstory. And like, I'm just so thankful that Dave Filoni was down to do that, because that's a little bit of a like a leap of faith for someone to do that, because this could just fall flat on its face. If everyone's like, dude, I don't know what's going on with Ahsoka, I'm not going to watch it. Like that could be a huge money loss for Disney. And the fact that they just like leaned into it and like not only just touched like a little bit of Star Wars lore, but dude, they are deeper than ever when it comes to Star Wars lore. And I like commend Dave for doing that. That's super impressive.
Again, like you can do it as long as you have good storytelling.
Yes.
Like it's really that simple. And little things like they establish in the first 2 episodes pretty clearly everyone's motivation. Like all of the dark side people are in this journey to go find Thrawn.
Yep.
And Ezra and Sabine and Ahsoka are trying to stop. Like Ahsoka's trying to stop Thrawn from coming. Yeah. Sabine wants to go get Ezra. They establish that really clearly, and then they put down pretty clear, indicators of why. Like, they show Sabine watching the hologram of Ezra kind of being like a little bit emotional, right?
Yeah,
like Ahsoka is like very clear about like why she's trying to avoid war, because she literally lived through a war and she knows what that's like. Even Balin and Shin Hati, they kind of dive into what they pretty quickly. They're like, what's waiting for us when we find Thrawn? Like unlimited power, like that.
And then
kind of
and then that Thrawn is this powerhouse warlord. Which the name, I forget what it was for the final episode. It was like the witch and the warlord. Was it with a play off of the Lion, the Witch, and the wardrobe. Yeah, I thought that was funny. Anyways.
No, it was cool. I really enjoyed the show. It was better than I expected. Like legitimately better than I expected.
Agreed.
Because like I was half expecting it to literally just be essentially, it was very much different from Rebels season 4, to be clear, because like Rebels had those characters, but it had a very classic like Empire rebellion type of dynamic. This did like they paint Thrawn as desperate in this show, and he's never desperate in the Rebels seasons or in the book. So like it's different than that, and like that's the part that was risky from there. And like I can kind of envision Dave Filoni pitching this story outline and legitimately getting pushback from execs.
I'm sure.
Like, hey, are you sure about this? And then somehow he must have the pull finally, thank God, to be like, no, like this is the way we're going to do it. And like, it is an investment, because if this does end up leading to a vast galactic conflict, which involves an Imperial remnant, a fledgling New Republic, in some third entity to be named later, like it has the potential to be a really grand storyline.
Correct.
And the only way that can take place is if you start small. It's no different than A New Hope. Like if you really look at A New Hope, it's like George Lucas literally has this big vision for this huge galactic conflict that's this clone war, that's this ultimate conflict between the Jedi and the Sith, and he has that all conceptualized. But what is the start of the episode? Like the start of the episode is like these 2 ships fighting, and then it's like, now we're going to go down to this desert planet. Now we're meeting Luke, and there's these 2 droids.
And people are smart enough to figure it out, though.
Yeah,
it's just like, okay, like Princess Leia, she's important. Okay, fine. Like it's okay if I don't know who she is. She's just important, right?
Yeah.
Like Darth Vader, badass bad guy. Okay, he's important too. Like laser swords. Like all this was so foreign at some point.
Yeah.
And it was so abrupt and so new. And it wasn't like people were like, oh, like I just didn't understand it. They're like, no, I want more. I want to understand it. Like it's interesting. And that's, I think, one of the things that people love about Game of Thrones so much is it's incredibly complex. They get to think about it when the show's over. And there's stuff that they don't know. That's like thought provoking. And like, and like so many things nowadays are so dumbed down. And like, I think people think that like the general public is just a bunch of idiots when like, we're not. Like we want complexity.
We want depth
when it comes to storylines. Like the most beautiful stories of all times throughout history have been complicated. Like Lord of the Rings is super complicated, yet one of the most like cherished stories of all time worldwide. Same thing with like Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter is like pretty complicated too. Again, cherished. Twilight. Cherished.
Yeah. Oh yeah. just ravenous fans.
Dude, vampires.
I think like I think it's interesting because like I think you can run into a fine line to where when it's overcomplicated and things don't tie together, it kind of disengages people. I think Marvel's dealing with that right now.
Yes.
Or they've gone
and Marvel's
so
had
off the
no
rails.
rules.
Yeah.
Absolutely no rules
There's no
for their
rules.
universe. It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
That's why we don't cover it. It's because like, what are you going to cover? Like in this movie, they did this, which is okay now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Carly and I are watching Loki right now, and we've actually enjoyed it because Loki is like kind of has its own little separate storyline that's a little bit more
so much backlash
like, lined up. But like, yeah, like I Marvel is a show that basically or a universe which exists to peddle superhero fodder.
Yeah, like bells and whistles of what a movie could be in 2023.
Exactly. Now, to be clear, before we get too critical, I thought that's what Kathleen Kennedy did with the sequel trilogy too.
Correct.
So, like, the sequel trilogy is garbage because it went the Marvel route of things without identifying it's not Marvel. Yeah. And that's kind of the kind of disconnect there that they have to figure out.
Right. And before anybody freaks out, like we're not haters on Marvel.
I've seen all the movies.
There's just a reason why we don't cover it is because for Jason and I, there's really not a lot of things to cover when it comes to Marvel.
And we might cover a Marvel movie or something like that here or there, but like it's not.
Perhaps not.
But it's not. Yeah, it's not something. Like I appreciate when I'm, watching the Rings of Power, and like I'm like, okay, so this ancient elf gets into this conflict with this Balrog of Morgoth, which is this demon thing by a tree. And they have this conflict, and in the conflict, they, clash, and the result is like literally this ore that gets like sent in through the mountain,
right? Which
is filled with pure light, which the elves want, right? And then like the Balrog gets literally like sent down to the bottom of the depths of the mountain, and then the dwarves end up mining this stuff to give to the elves, which ends up unlocking the Balrog.
Right. There's such a cool story there.
Yeah, which fucks up all the dwarves. And then you watch Lord of the Rings, and they're in the mines of Moria, and they see all the dwarves are dead, and there's the Balrog. It's all tied together so intricately, literally by a man who wrote it almost a century and a half ago.
Aged
and
well.
And that to me is what's cool is there's like that to me. You can tell there's real pride, and again, like Stan Lee, the guy who the Marvel guy. I'm not sitting here and acting like he hasn't, conceptualized more of that. But the comic book world
what he's
very
done
much
with Marvel is incredible. Like it is,
and more successful,
and yes, and wildly greater than probably anything I will ever accomplish in my life. Like I'm not downplaying that at all, but like, yeah, dude, it feels like so. You know how like Star Wars has like canon and like legends. Marvel feels like it's all legends, like where it's just like anything
That's a great
goes.
point.
Like, anything goes no matter what.
Even movie to movie, it doesn't necessarily have to tie together super well.
Exactly.
But like I will say too, with Marvel, like talking about quality of movie making, like DC has better heroes. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, like the Green Lantern. They have better heroes than Iron Man, who's cool, Captain America's cool. Like Marvel has cool heroes, but I would argue DC has like more iconic heroes.
I feel you.
But DC has just made shit movies. And so people haven't gotten on board with it. Whereas like the Marvel movies have had this really cool, because one of the things I'll give credit to Marvel for is like they have nailed down the formula which is like get charismatic actors to play these roles. Like I love Ben Affleck, but he's not charismatic, right? You get charismatic people to play these roles. You add like you make it. The Marvel does not hide that they're trying to be entertaining.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I
no,
mean?
you're right. They lean entirely into that.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas Lord of the Rings, for instance, they have their little jokes. You know, Pippin
Correct.
and Merry will make a joke here or there. Gimli will make a joke with Legolas here or there. But for the most part, they're not trying to be funny.
Yeah, yeah.
They're trying to tell a story.
They're telling a story. Exactly.
And like Marvel's like, we're going to tell a very loose story while primarily trying to entertain you with
bells and
humor
whistles,
action and bells and whistles.
And who knows if that ages well? You know, like
Yeah.
it may not age very well. I don't know. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say it probably doesn't age super well.
Of course not.
That's probably the other difference between like a Star Wars and a Marvel is how beautifully Star Wars has aged.
Yeah,
like,
and over decades.
Yes,
decades and
like,
decades.
Star Wars could not have aged better, in my opinion. Like that with the practical effects, especially, like they are still so cool to watch on screen. Like it's incredible what they did. Like,
even 50 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that because they used, and we've talked about this too, and we won't get into details, but because they used like models, it just looks really cool on screen. Anyways,
no, I 100% agree. And like as far as like in the big picture too, I would argue, you know, the sheer volume that Marvel put out kind of cheapened things too.
Yeah, yeah. No,
to the
I
extent where it's like they would just divide and conquer and like literally just constantly be producing the next piece of content, which directly affected the overall continuity of things.
Correct.
But like, but they were. It's a money making machine. Marvel is a big money making machine, essentially. And like, and I understand the business side of things. Again, I talk about this with my show all the time. Like, I like every single year, I get people that complain about how often I cover the Lakers and Warriors, and it's like I literally have to, in order to generate the revenue. Like, and I'm going to do like to me. I can have things on the side that I do, but I got to have my meat and potatoes. So like, I understand that there's a profit building side of this, but like, I think Star Wars has such a devoted fan base.
Yes.
That you can create quality content that doesn't necessarily qualify as like cheap, low-hanging fruit.
Correct.
But that still it monetizes well. And by the way, like I haven't seen the full numbers, but I want to say that Ahsoka performed pretty well.
Really? Yeah. I don't
and I'll have to look into it. And I think Disney had put out, I want to say the first release, the first 2 episodes or whatever of Ahsoka, it was in the 10 to 20 million range. Like it was like 15 to 16 million people watched. To give you an idea, like that's literally like an NBA Finals game. That's a big deal.
That's
so
a huge deal. Yeah.
So like a lot of people watched, and so it you can have success this way.
Right.
And no, I don't want Star Wars to inundate us with content nonstop. Now I think one of their workarounds is to work different storylines. Like this is the way you do it. Like
I feel you.
You have a High Republic story, and then that's quality, and then you have a story that like as opposed to in the same timeline like Marvel does, which can get really really tricky.
Right.
But yeah, I am a big fan of the direction Dave Filoni's taking the franchise. In general, I'm just a little bummed out about how long we're going to have to wait to find out stuff. But again, I'm not going to complain too much because we do have stuff to cover. And like we just have so much that we can get into in terms of Star Wars content to hold us over in the meantime.
For sure. Like incredible Star Wars lore that's legends that you and I consider canon. There's one last topic that I want to get into before we get into Bane, which is Dathomir, which is super, super interesting to me because it was very surprising how much they leaned into Dathomir. And what's also very surprising, and I don't know how exactly it relates, but in season 3 of Clone Wars, before you get into the Mortis gods content, it's like literally the episodes directly before it are about Dathomir and Asajj Ventress and Savage and like the Night Sisters and how that all plays a role into this. Who knows? But the fact that they literally ended Ahsoka with Thrawn heading towards Dathomir was incredibly interesting to me. And
then a wide shot of all the caskets.
Yeah,
which clearly look like caskets.
Yeah, we think that all like all the, what do they call it? They call it Thrawn has a name for like his like not product that they're trying to move into.
Cargo.
They call it cargo.
Yeah, they call it cargo.
Which seems like they look exactly like caskets.
It could be a bunch of different things. It could be his legion of stormtroopers that's all dead. It could be literally whatever Night Sister population was existing on that planet of Peridia before that the Night Mothers wanted to take.
Yeah.
Again, like him going to Dathomir could be him just dropping off the girls. It could be him dropping off the girls and the casket.
I got to drop the ladies off.
Drop the ladies off. Drop the ladies off real quick.
Oh, dude, no. That actually, I always envisioned those as like stormtroopers that had been slain. Dude, what if it is a bunch of like Dathomirian like men and women that are there?
It's
like,
possible.
In the casket.
So
like
in Jedi Fallen Order, Marin at one point like brings her sisters back to life, and they're literally hanging in these like literally like spider egg sacs essentially from the trees and stuff. Pretty gross, right? And then they like kind of open up and all these like zombies fall out. So like, and we all, by the way, I don't know if you remember this, but from those episodes of Clone Wars right before Mortis, the Night Sisters actually reanimate their dead sisters to fight. There's like living sisters that are shooting the lasers, and then there's literally like a bunch of the zombie like crazy girls like there, right? So like that's the thing is like that is that's clearly a thing in Night Sister culture is like when we need a fight, our dead sisters come help us.
Yeah,
like that's
super weird.
Yeah, which is weird, but that could literally. I mean, the caskets there was thousands of them.
No, that does make sense because Morgan Elsbeth again like sacrifices herself essentially so Thrawn and friends can get away, and Thrawn says, and I don't know if this is Morgan Elsbeth like intentionally doing this or not, but Thrawn goes, what does he say? He goes for the Empire as he's like about to turn and like leave her. And then Thrawn is out of earshot. And then Morgan Elsbeth like kind of quietly says for Dathomir.
Yeah, and there's body language between those two moments where she's like a little like whatever, man, and then kind of turns around.
Yeah, so I don't know if that is like, okay, I'm doing this for Dathomir. Thrawn knows that these are our people that he's bringing back, or if like the Night Sisters have their own alternative motive that might not align well with Thrawn's. Like, who knows?
Well, and that's what's kind of cool about it is there's all these entities now. Like you're gonna literally have the New Republic. You're going to have, I mean, and even in the New Republic, there's fracturing, but then you've got like the Shadow Council, and then you've got Thrawn and the Night Sisters returning, and then you've got the people that are out in Peridia and that are good, meaning Ahsoka and Sabine, and then you also have Baylan and Shinhati, and then you also have whatever this entity is that's out there.
There's a lot of power players there.
Exactly, and I'm excited about that because like what would be really cool is if they all kind of congealed into different alliances and kind of figured it out from there. I think we're at 42 minutes, so let's just go ahead and end this episode, and then we'll just record Bane separately.
Cool.
Sound good?
Yep.
All right, thank you guys so much for supporting the show. We will see you guys when the Bane video comes out, probably a few days later.